So this cemetery right here, this is a very small cemetery, and this is where Abraham Lincoln came many times. This is where he actually came, and for the funeral of Ann Rutledge. That was the woman that Abraham Lincoln would have married there if she hadn't died early in life. She died in her 20s there. Now, she's not currently buried here. I didn't realize this at first, but around 1890 or so, her body was moved to Oakland Cemetery from Concord. Now, the situation is that getting to the cemetery, there's a lot of roads that, like a horse and buggy would take, maybe actually more for a horse than a horse and buggy. You know, it takes one-lane roads and to get here. So this is an old 1800 cemetery, and some of the people that are buried here are clearly from the New Salem colony, as it were. I'll just call it a colony. They were from New Salem, where Abraham Lincoln spent his time as a youth, where he was a surveyor, and also too where he met Ann Rutledge and fell deeply in love with her. And you know, the father of Ann Rutledge there was the one that founded the New Salem there, pretty much. And I believe that it was because of him that Abraham Lincoln was able to have much of his prowess, as it were, with government and business. In fact, Abraham Lincoln, when he first came to New Salem, it was more by accident there. It looked like that you know, he was piloting a boat and got stuck there, and then you know, he later came back and settled there in his 20s there, and you know, he fell in love with Ann Rutledge, who you know, she was a young lady in her 20s or so, and you know, he fell in love with her early. Well, she was in her 20s when she died, but you know, but they really loved each other, and there was a time even when Abraham Lincoln, he had left New Salem there to fight in the Black Hawk War in Dixon, Illinois there, because Black Hawk was doing some posturing, and he was a Native American Indian that was up to no good, I guess, as it was understood. And needless to say, you know, it was his friends that elected him captain of the Illinois militia there. But you know, it was in New Salem there that Abraham Lincoln lived. You know, he would have, you know, clearly known of Ann Rutledge's father, or known him. In fact, I believe, you know, Abraham Lincoln had stayed in the inn there that was, you know, run by Ann Rutledge's father, and that's where he would have known Ann Rutledge there. And you know, he stayed in that inn before he got his before he had co-ownership, as it were, with the business, couple businesses there in New Salem, and you know, he even basically became a Illinois state representative while in New Salem, and it was him and I guess several others that got the Illinois state government moved there from the capital moved from Vandalia to Springfield, and then later Abraham Lincoln moved from New Salem to Springfield, where he had the only home that he actually purchased there. And so needless to say, this little graveyard here, there are plenty of times that Abraham Lincoln would have come here alone, this gravesite, and he would have come from New Salem there, and he came here, and he would have, you know, wept over the woman he loved there, who died in her 20s there, who he never married, and he went into a deep depression even at times. But it was here in this cemetery where you know, I believe Abraham Lincoln even said his heart was buried. That you know, and Ann, and I even went over. Apparently, Ann Rutledge was buried with the other Rutledges, and I took a short video there, clip of where some of the other Rutledges are buried that would have been part of New Salem there. So it's like I say, it's a small cemetery, and you know, it's important to remember these things, because you know, if Abraham Lincoln would not have had a situation where, you know, his boat got stuck, and you know, and he had to stay at New Salem, and then later on he came back and settled there. If that would not have happened, then he probably would never have become the President of the United States, because it would have taken him actually having some sort of exposure to a man that had founded a you know, a whole community of people, you know, to be able to be good at politics, and you know, good as a soldier, good as a captain there of the Illinois militia, you know, and it was those early experiences with that, and then becoming part of the Illinois militia there, and you know, fighting in the Black Hawk War, though he never saw any action, I guess. But you know, he was willing to come up to Dixon with a band of fellow people from New Salem to fight in the Black Hawk War, and you know, with Black Hawks posturing there in Dixon. So you know, when we look at this and we think about it, it's important to remember here, because you know, sometimes in our lifetime, you know, there are people that may have had some success at something, and you know, like Ann Rutledge and her father, he obviously had some decent success, and you know, being able to have New Salem, and he started it, I believe, as he had like a mill there, and you know, a couple other things, and it just kind of grew into what it was. So he basically founded it, as it were, and he was able to sell off different parts of it and stuff to people, and grow it there, and so, but without somebody like that, you know, early on in a person's life, you know, when a person's in their early 20s, they're starting to, especially you know, a young boy is becoming a man, a young man, you know, they're wanting to have a course for the rest of their life. They're wanting to have some sort of direction for the rest of their life, and that's where, you know, it's important to be able to be mentoring those kind of people when they're young, and not kick them down, you know. I know in Abraham Lincoln's case there, he came, you know, there to New Salem as a young man, and you know, and it really transformed him, you know, gave him a direction in life, as it were, I believe, and you know, and he was able to have a career in government, be able to be a good soldier, a surveyor, even county surveyor, and be an Illinois state representative, and then, you know, later he was even able to become the President of the United States. And so you know, it matters. This history matters, and you know, to think that Abraham Lincoln would have come here not far from New Salem. You know, he could have come here. I don't know if he came here on the weekends, or if he came here on the weekdays, or how or when he came here. But he came here, and he came here often. And he came to the cemetery, and you know, he would have just really grieved the love of his life, having lost the love of his life. You know, the very woman that he just desperately wanted to marry. It was clear And when you're a young man, that sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's a person that, what happens there is you get in a situation where you're a young man and, you've only had life experiences by yourself. And then what happens is a young woman comes into your life and you love her dearly, dearly, dearly. I mean, with all your heart. And then something sometimes happens where she's gone. And then you lose that. Now, Abraham Lincoln there, he was to the point where apparently he wanted to end it, But he didn't. And, one of his friends took away the pocket knife, as I understand it. And he didn't. And because he didn't, he became the president of the United States. And that's what's important here, that he really changed from a man that was kicked down, that was in life, that had lost his great love, that didn't know how he was going to go on, and really felt that his heart was buried here in this very cemetery. To go from that to become the president of the United States, that's where, sometimes you have to look and you might think you're in a situation that's so bad in your life that you can't go on. But you know what? God can have greater things for you. I know there when Abraham Lincoln left Springfield and he basically gave a farewell address saying that, that the very ties of life there were, the fundamental ties of life, as it were, that he had there with Springfield, that his children were born there and he'd spent his life there, much of his life there, not all of his life there, he was from other places. But it was there that he married Todd, and he had his children there, and he said that the nation was facing a crisis, basically, unlike anything that had ever been faced, before, really. It was facing a crisis since George Washington's time, and that was basically the Civil War. And he was leaving for Washington, D.C., and he didn't know whether he was ever going to come back. He didn't, and he left. He left there and left Springfield, and he didn't come back alive. And he had said before he left that he was committing the people into God's care. He prayed that they would commit him to God's care, basically. And he said the only way that there was going to be success is if God caused it to succeed. And he did. And the Civil War was won under Lincoln. And, we look back at those times and you think about it, and Lincoln didn't come back to Springfield until after he was killed. And then, as the story goes, that this is what I was told by a state worker who said that his father painted the dome in the new state capitol. Apparently what happened there is that as Lincoln's body was coming back to Springfield, after the war and after Lincoln had been killed, as his body was coming back there, apparently the government had wanted a particular site for him to be buried, and this was according to a state worker that had been, working at the Capitol for decades, and he claimed his father had painted the dome, and grandfather painted the dome in the Capitol. He was a retired man. And apparently Mary Todd, his wife, according to the story, did not want her husband buried where the government wanted him buried. And instead, she wanted him buried either in Oak Ridge Cemetery And if they wouldn't let him be buried there, then she'd be taking the body to Chicago, is what the story was that the government workers told. And he was somebody that was really committed to telling oral stories and stuff of Springfield. Well, you know, Abraham Lincoln's body was buried in Oak Ridge, but the site on which that the government worker claimed that the government wanted Lincoln's body buried is where a few years later the new Illinois state capitol was built. So the new capitol there was built on that site, and there's a statue of Lincoln there in the front of it, right in front, directly in front of it. And on the back of the statue, there's like a board that shows Lincoln's farewell address to Springfield, the people of Springfield. And you know what it basically means is that Abraham Lincoln, he had been instrumental in moving the state capitol from Vandalia to Springfield. That's number one. And then if the story I'm telling you is true, which I certainly believe it is, it seems very plausible, then after Lincoln had died, then his memory and the great feeling that people had, you know, about his martyrdom, as it were, in his life and the value of his life, would have been so instrumental that the public outpouring of emotion, and that they then again moved the state capitol from the old capitol grounds to where they wanted to have Abraham Lincoln buried, because they couldn't have him buried there because his wife wouldn't allow it. So that tells you in a nutshell that Lincoln was instrumental in moving the state capitol either once or twice. And, you know, really, that is unreal to think of. You know, there were a lot of people back then that they had gains, lots of gain in slavery. You know, there was a lot of profit that people made in slavery. So the people that were profiting from it would not have wanted it to end. And so Lincoln, what he initially did was to set things up so that it didn't spread. You know, so the states that had it would continue to have it, but that the states that didn't, it wouldn't spread into those places. So that was what initially it was set up to be. But then, you know, things happened where, because of the politics and the people, you know, states started to succeed, and you know, you had people that objected to the politics of the day, and you know, you eventually had some succession, and I can go into, you know, if I really spent the time, into some of the reasons why it all happened and stuff, but basically, to make a long story short there, that you know, Abraham Lincoln through the Civil War and through putting an end to that united the Union, put an end to slavery, and changed all of the world as we know it, basically. And this was a very pivotal point right here, this very cemetery. The cemetery here was a very pivotal point in Abraham Lincoln's life. You know, because he went down a road of depression, and you know, he could have come here and just done something unthinkable, but he didn't. He didn't, and he became the president of the United States. And all this stuff is very important to understand, because when you understand these things, you can kind of see, how things go, how a path in life can go, what a good way is, and how people can, rise to power. And, it really was, as I understand it, his friends in New Salem that basically elected him to be captain of the militia. So it was them that came to that conclusion, and they wanted him to be their captain when they went up to Dixon there and had to fight Black Hawk in the Black Hawk War. And and they were his core, would have been his core people there that supported him in his early years. And so Ann Rutledge, it's important to remember that. Important to remember that her father, was like one of the people that founded New Salem, and that Abraham Lincoln stayed at the inn there. Ann's father had that inn, and and Abraham Lincoln fell in love with Ann Rutledge, and really had a great love in his life that he lost. So anyway, great reflection for today. And so, if God has called you to something great, it's important to remember there that the resources that you have for that can be right there with you. And early on especially, and you just have to be able to see them and identify them and figure out how to use them even to get to where God wants you to be. So anyway, God bless. Bye for now. And I'll tell you what, you can almost imagine close to 200 years ago, Abraham Lincoln coming to this spot, crying, a funeral for Ann, and how devastating that was for him. Anyway, God bless. God bless America. God love you and keep you forever. Have a nice day. Bye.